When you have a good bus operation, you are feeding economic activity in retail, in lodging, in hospitality, in recreation, in food and beverage. We all need each other. If I'm just a bus company and I don't have a place to take people, I'm not going to be as effective. And not every location is like Disney or Washington, D.C. or New York City. There's a lot of destinations out in the country that are flyover or passover. And so bus travel, group travel, they really are a core part of their business DNA.
You're listening to the Ground Transportation Podcast with Ken Lucci of Driving Transactions and James Blain of PAX Training. Learn how you can build a thriving transportation business with real profits, repeat clients, and enterprise value. And now for your hosts, Ken and James.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Ground Transportation Podcast. Unfortunately, today, I do not have my amazing, incredible co-host, Ken Lucci. He is no doubt out there doing incredible financial work that we will have to find out about later. But who I do have today is a friend of mine, someone I'm very excited to have on the podcast, someone that I think is going to shed a lot of light on what's going on at ABA and all the incredible things they have coming down the pipeline. We have Fred Ferguson, the president of ABA. Fred, welcome to the podcast, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Hey, I am super excited. You have come into ABA. You have immediately started making things better. You know, you had some big shoes to fill. I love Pete Pantuso. He did incredible work. And I got to say, you have hit the ground running. But for a lot of people, I'd like to help them get to know you because I got to tell you, Fred, for someone that is running such an incredible association, I feel like we haven't gotten the chance to really get to know you. So you tell us a little bit about your background and where you came from and how you got to ABA?
Yeah, so ABA is the American Bus Association. We're the trade association that represents the private motorcoach, charter bus, and group travel industries. You know, we're headquartered here in Washington, D.C. We host an annual show called Marketplace, ABA
Incredible
Marketplace.
show.
A lot of people know us for Marketplace, but it's a great organization. I've been here a year and a half. I did have the honor of following Pete Pantuso, who's been an incredible partner and mentor as I've taken the reins. He led this organization for 28 years. He's a giant, and in some ways, it's humbling to take on the work that he led for so many years. As we're recording this, I just got back from a family trip to Utah. I've got 2 young kids, and I grew up in Utah, and I have a 92-year-old grandmother there. So having just spent some time with her, and for my kids, it's their great-grandmother, it was amazing. Just an awesome time to reconnect and be with family. In terms of my background, I think being a dad is first and foremost the most important thing that I do. I know you're in the same exact boat. I think our kids are the exact same ages.
Yep.
I also have a family business. My wife operates a retail and e-commerce business based here in Middleburg, Virginia.
Oh, really?
And so that's a huge part of our life as well. It's actually pretty cool. Our kids think that speaking to a computer is work. That's what they've always seen. But now that we have a store, they sweep, they stock the shelves, they take out the trash. They're learning the lessons you want them to learn about what real work is. So that's been really, really rewarding to be a part of the small business community. And I've learned a ton in running a small business that's helped me with the organizations such as ABA. You know, before ABA, I spent time as a corporate executive with a company called Vista Outdoor. It was a publicly traded outdoor products company that had 42 different outdoor brands in its portfolio.
Wow.
Some of those were Overland Park-based Bushnell, which is the optics brand that does scopes, binoculars, laser rangefinders. But we had Camelback, we had Bell helmets, Camp Chef, Sims Fishing, basically anything you would find at an REI or a Bass Pro, we made at Vista. So that was a great company. I was the head of their government relations and communications. So virtually anything that touched the outside world, whether it was Congress, investors, you know, different nonprofits, I was the guy coordinating and running that portfolio. It was a great experience. Before that, you know, I spent about 8.5 years working in Congress. I was a chief of staff to a member of Congress from the state of Utah, my home state. And, you know, in that role, I managed 3 different offices, 1 in DC, 2 in Utah. My boss was the chairman of the Oversight Committee, which is the chief investigatory committee of the House of Representatives. We had jurisdiction to investigate anything at any time. This committee got its start with Abraham Lincoln back in the 1850s when he was in the House. And it's always meant to protect the taxpayer and the Treasury from waste, fraud, and abuse. It was an amazing experience to lead that full committee.
How do you get there though? Like that is, I got to tell you, that's a huge deal. How does that happen? Like, how do you end up in that role?
Yeah, I mean, not to make light of it, but so much of life is timing and luck.
Right.
And I think I've had extremely good timing and good luck in my career. But for me, honestly, it started with the game of baseball. I was a baseball player my entire life. I played in college baseball. Steven Strasburg, the Hall of Fame pitcher, he and I were in the same conference. And I do not have a good track record against him. That's why I'm here and he's who he is. But after my senior year of college, I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do with my life.
Okay.
And my parents had actually met in Washington, D.C. as interns. So I interned. I put my hat in the ring to intern. My brother is a Marine Corps pilot. And in my interview, I was prepared to talk about national defense and this, that, and the other. And all they wanted to talk about was slow pitch softball. So they knew I was a baseball guy.
Yeah.
The congressman that ultimately hired me as an intern, he is the biggest baseball fan you will ever meet. And that was it. That was my foot in the door. And from there, it's again, you can have good timing, you can have good luck, but you got to perform. And what I learned in DC is it's such a game of relationships, of authenticity.
Yeah.
I think the news shows Washington, D.C. as people hating each other. But I think in real life, Republican staff, Democrat staff, we get along extremely well. I mean, some of my best friends are Democrats. I did work for Republican offices. And, in the day-to-day grind, we work together 95% of the time. It's just the 5% that elevates to the news, which is too bad. But DC was just an amazing experience. I had a lot of fun. And, again, I was very fortunate that I was able to move from the guy answering phones to the guy answering mail. Then all of a sudden I had a legislative portfolio. Then all of a sudden I was leading the legislative teams. And then the crescendo for me was becoming a chief of staff, where we had 85 people in our orbit, over $10 million in budget that I controlled. It was an unbelievable experience that at the time I just thought it was fun. But in reality, I was learning incredible lessons that have prepared me for things like being a dad and small business and now running, ABA, which ABA collectively, we sit on about $15 million in assets. We generate about $7 million in revenue per year. That puts us kind of in the mid-size association benchmark. So we're not small, we're not massive, but certainly since I've been here, we've got a pretty nice growth trajectory where we're adding members, we're adding people to our shows. And it's just a really exciting time to be here.
Well, and I think one of the big things for me, right, is that you have a unique organization. You think of most of your trade associations when it comes to passenger ground transportation, and it is just purely operators, right? You got operators, and then you got some suppliers that are selling them things. ABA has got a really unique DNA and a really unique makeup. For those that aren't as familiar with ABA, obviously we sponsor BISC, we've been very involved. But for those that maybe haven't been involved in ABA or that new to the bus industry or are new to coming to events in the bus industry, can you help us kind of understand what is it that makes the DNA of ABA unique? What makes the membership so different from other associations?
Yeah, we are a multi-membership organization. As the bus association, bus operators, that's our heartbeat. That's our heart and soul. And within that segment, we have the scheduled service bus operators, and then we have charter bus operators, each of whom have different business models, but the through line is the motor coach. But what I think the strength of ABA is our breadth and our diversity. And what that means is ABA has attracted over its 100-year history. We are celebrating our 100th year, which is something like less than 0.5% of all businesses ever get to this moment. But what ABA has done effectively is all of those stakeholders who benefit from a bus full of people,
Right.
they join because they want to be part of the community. They want to have the relationships. They want to meet the bus operators because, frankly, they know that if a bus full of people comes to their restaurant or their attraction or their destination, they're going to make their numbers for the day. And, so much so that we've actually funded an economic impact report of the bus and group travel industry. And there's a great graphic that I'll share with you that shows basically this flywheel effect that when you have a good bus operation, you are feeding economic activity in retail, in lodging, in hospitality, in recreation, in food and beverage. And what that shows us and our members is we all need each other. If I'm just a bus company and I don't have a place to take people, I'm not going to be as effective. And similarly, if I'm a location, not every location is like Disney or Washington, D.C. or New York City. There's a lot of destinations out in the country that are flyover or passover. And so bus travel, group travel, they really are a core part of their business DNA. And I think what's most rewarding about ABA is we connect all those dots. When you come to our show, ABA Marketplace, we host over 70,000 individual business appointments over a 4-day period. And these appointments are being held by companies, some large, but mostly very, very small. And these businesses without Marketplace, they have no ability to sell or attract regional or even national audiences. So when they come to our show, they're filling up an order book essentially for the next 12 months. So you get 12 months worth of sales calls that happen in 4 days.
Right.
And what that means at our show, and you've been there, you're one of the loyal exhibitors for a lot of reasons, but people, there's this common phrase that ABA is like family. And I think what that means is when you come to our show, there's 2 things that happen. One, people that come back. So you have people
100%.
who have been there for decades because, again, they get value from the show. So you have this kind of connection and personal relationship with people. But second, I think a lot of people make money when they come to ABA. So they're very happy. And that is just a really good recipe. And honestly, a lot of trade shows do not have that level of energy, personal connection, and happiness that you see at ABA. And that's really what makes it magical because we all need each other.
I think to that point, ABA Marketplace for me, and as viewers and listeners know, I'm on the road a lot. I'm always at local associations. I'm at national associations. You name it, I am out there. I am constantly involved. And ABA Marketplace is probably the most unique show that I attend. And to your point about it being like family, I can tell you, I am lucky enough that I got involved around COVID. Aaron Descharme, who was with Women in Buses at the time, they were putting together this new group called the Driving Force. Fred, obviously, you know tons about it because now we're a full-blown council, but it was this idea that we were going to help people get resources for hiring, help them overcome the driver shortage, kind of build things out. And it kind of was born coming out of COVID. And I got to tell you, I was really lucky in that I was the literal kid on the group. We had Mike McDonald, we had Brent Maitland, we had Aaron, you had Pam from DATCO, you had Adam Hall, you had all of these people that, like you said, they've been going to ABA 10 plus years. They've been involved forever. All of these people that are kind of like these core tenets of the show of ABA. And I was kind of the kid, right? I was the new guy. And I was super lucky in that everyone in that group immediately took me under their wing. Hey, what value can you provide? Hey, how can we do this? Hey, how can we do that? And everybody kind of found their lane and started working on it. And it was really great for me at this last marketplace when we were in Reno, because now that my kids are older, right? We mentioned family businesses. My wife has come in as our director of marketing. And so Aaron, who usually comes with me to the shows, wasn't able to make it. He had something come up. And so that became my wife as marketing director. You're in the hot seat. It's time to go. And we had been at the show for maybe all of 10 minutes when I'm setting up the booth and I get a text from Pam. Hey, I got your wife. I found her. And then the next thing I know, they're like, hey, we're signing your wife for Women in Buses. They just immediately kind of grabbed her and ran off with her in the best way and was like, we have a new friend, and kind of brought her into the fold. And so I think that's something that makes ABA so great is that there's a lot of information sharing. One thing I want you to talk about, though, is help us kind of understand the format, because we think of a traditional trade show where you've got a show floor from these hours and everybody goes to a session and come back to a show floor. The show floor itself is completely different. It's separated out into different components. And then kind of the way that ABA Marketplace runs is different. For those that aren't familiar with it, can you kind of help us understand how it ticks and how it's broken out? You talked about the sessions and the appointments, but I want to make sure that people kind of understand how that breaks out and what makes it different.
So the headline description for Marketplace is we are the domestic travel sales show. So if you are in ground transportation, and predominantly our membership is motorcoach based, but anybody, frankly, who runs a transportation company, there's a place for you at Marketplace. And the reason I say that is all of the destinations, the restaurants, the attractions, the DMOs, they're coming to recruit transportation companies, bus operators, tour operators. They want them, again, to bring their passengers, to bring their tours, to bring their trips to their location.
Yeah.
So the show floor is a massive floor, and it's essentially divided up into, we have appointment desks, and then we have exhibitors. The exhibitors is kind of a traditional show floor where you've got PAX Training is displaying your product and your value. But we also have the destinations. So Visit Branson, great place in Missouri. They've got ice cream booth and
Every
coffee
year.
stands, and
Yep.
it's all about come to Branson. The Wisconsin team brings the cheese. Kentucky brings the bourbon. It's a very cool show experience. And then we've got buses and the equipment as well. But the show really is about, how do I build travel and sales into my transportation business?
Right.
And so the appointments, it's this multiple football fields of desks. And at any given time, there's a transportation and tour provider meeting with one of these suppliers, the destinations and attractions, et cetera. And they're just exchanging leads and needs. And our software connects you with kind of the flavor of business you want to meet with. So your appointments aren't random. You get to choose and kind of tailor the appointment to fit your needs. But it really is special because all of that economic activity is happening throughout the entire 4-day show. Another way to think about ABA, it's really through the 4 things that we do, the 4 kind of core pillars of how we operate. And it's advocacy and lobbying, it's operations and safety, it's workforce and culture, and it's marketplace.
Yeah.
So marketplace really is one of 4 things that we do. Marketplace is all about business development. But at the Marketplace show, and honestly, at ABA, 12 months out of the year, we're advancing our lobbying and advocacy agenda. Ground transportation is heavily regulated. And if we don't have a voice in Washington, there's an expression that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So we have to be organized to represent ourselves. And so our show, and again, ABA throughout the year, is all about lobbying and harnessing the collective voice of our industry for good. Second is safety. And this gets into your world.
Absolutely.
You sit on the Bus Industry Safety Council Executive Committee. This is the preeminent gathering of bus safety and bus maintenance professionals. And we hold seminars, trainings, workshops, not only at our marketplace, but throughout the year as well. And one thing that I'm excited about is we're going to be rolling out certifications so that individuals who participate in the content and go through these sessions, there's a credential on the other end for you. And that's going to help individual personal development. It's going to help companies market themselves better when they've got, more certified mechanics or safety professionals. And we think it's going to be a real value add. But then workforce, no business operates without good people. And you talked about driving force, which was a working group that we have formalized into a standalone council, the Driving Force Council, which you're also on the executive committee.
I'm a glutton for
But
punishment.
it goes hand
Fred.
in hand. You need great people and you need to train them well. And it's all interconnected. And then again, the 4th plank is marketplace. And so to me, if you want to work in our industry, you need a strategy for every one of those planks. regulatory, safety, workforce, and sales. And we try and really bring that all together, not only at our show, but throughout membership throughout the year. And so it's a tremendous opportunity. I'll give you a few statistics. At Marketplace, again, it's a travel show. That's how people view us. We have 724 operators that attend the show. So it's not just the travel and destination community that's there. We have a huge operator base that attends. Now, we also have over 1,500 plus sales, travel, destination representatives, but collectively we have between 25 and 3,000 people. And when you have that many people in a room, there's just so much networking and leads and discussions, and it really is a magical place.
I think for me, the very first ABA that I went to was when Pete Pantuso was still with ABA. And I remember for us, it was really easy because it was in Omaha. Now, I got to tell you, the one thing that gets me about ABA is I don't know why it's typically cold, so we have good jackets. It's just kind of a fun thing that we always joke about. But we drove up to Omaha, and of course, it's like the one time it's like coming down snow. And I remember being at that show, and I didn't really know anyone. It was the first time having a booth, our first time, we just entered the motor coach industry, and our timing was impeccable. Fred, I am the king of timing. We moved into the motor coach industry in January 2020 is when we started working with motor coach. Yeah, we all know what happens in March. But it was really great because, a couple things. I mentioned, they made friends with my wife, and now she's going to be in Women in Busing. I had a very similar experience. I was coming in, I was green. Probably on the first night, I remember Aaron Ducharme, who is now running the driving force, the guys from MCI. So it was Aaron, I think it was Brent, it was Lynn, a bunch of people. We all ended up at this taco place. And very quickly, obviously now we're all partners running this full council when really all we were trying to do was help out. It's one of those things where I think what makes ABA so special is these little ideas, these little sparks of trying to help each other, trying to build out into full-blown becoming their own things that help people. One of my favorite parts is, even though we don't do anything on the maintenance side, I love that the Bus Industry Safety Council backs right up against Busmark. I'm very lucky and that I get to call Jeff Shanker, Sal, and Mike McDonald friends. Between the three of them, there's enough experience to pretty much learn anything you could ever want, right? And so for me, the great thing there is that, you get to go through all of this safety, and then I get to go be a kid again, because one of the best parts about Busmark that I haven't seen anywhere else in the industry is we go on field trips, right? We literally turn into kids for the day. We pile onto a bus and we go to someone's operation and they invite us in and we get to do a site visit and they'll tour you through their facility. They'll share what they're doing. They'll share what's worked. They'll share what hasn't. And so there's this amazing wealth of knowledge. And I've got to tell you, I'm extremely excited as someone in training, as someone that does certifications, about the fact that we're now as ABA going to be able to certify. Because if you've ever wanted to know about compliance, if you've ever wanted to know, hey, how do I manage these DQ files? What needs to be in it? What do I do with this? What happens when I get audited? All of these things are kind of the core of BISC. I had in Florida a new safety manager, and their owners had reached out to me and said, hey, I own this company. I brought in our son-in-law to do safety. Is there anything you do to help him? And I said, sure, buy him a plane ticket. We're going to the BISC summer meeting. He's coming with me.
That's awesome.
And it was great because we got him introduced. We got him in the mentor program, got him up to speed. And the ability to do that, the resources, what's there is just huge. And I know that one of the big things for me about ABA was when I got there the first time at Marketplace, I was overwhelmed. And so there's just so much knowledge, so much there. Let me ask you, as someone who is building this incredible vision of where we're going, what we're doing with it, what do you recommend for operators, for their safety staff, their maintenance staff, for people that are trying to figure out what part of the pool do I dip my toe in? Or do you just recommend they dive in head first? What's the best way for people to start engaging with ABA, to get to know what you're doing, to join in and be part of that?
Yeah, I think like any organization, your power is in your people.
Yeah.
So it's all about getting to know the ABA team. And through you, and obviously through me today, I want anyone and everyone to know that we've got an open inbox, open door, open phone call, whatever you want to call it, to get in touch with us. And I'm sure we can add my email address to the recording, but I would love for people to reach out to me directly. I'm a big believer in social media and LinkedIn.
Oh,
Connect on
absolutely.
there. It's such an easy way to keep up with people and to communicate. But honestly, we're all people behind the screens or behind the names. So it's like, just reach out to us, talk to us. Our website within about, well, I don't know when this is being published, but we may have a new website when this recording goes live. And the website will just be easier to consume information, to get in touch with us.
Oh.
I'm excited. We're bringing on a new team member. We actually have hired a director of safety and certifications. We've never had that position before. And we were able to recruit a gal who spent 20 years at the Department of Transportation, 15 of which was spent in the rulemaking division of FMCSA. She is wicked smart. Our general counsel has basically locked horns with her in the past, in a good way, as general counsels do with an agency. But there's a lot of respect that he has for her. She's spoken at Marketplace. She's come to talk about the charter rule and the drug and alcohol program. So to have a talent like that join us to help us create better programming, better training, better in-person experiences, she's going to be a huge asset. And I cannot wait for everyone to get to know Crystal. We're probably a few weeks away from her officially joining us at ABA.
I couldn't be more excited about Crystal either. And to the comment you've made with locking horns with the general counsel, I am one of those people that believes that steel sharpens steel, right? What I loved so much about when I joined Driving Force, have I always agreed with every single person on there? No, I'm sure there are times where they were just like, oh God, James, but that's okay, because I know that when I need help, I've got someone I can call. When they need help, they know that they've got someone they can call. And having people like that are constantly going to help keep your edge sharp, that are going to help keep you in the know, they're going to help keep you honest. I talk to these people on a regular basis. They're friends, right? When we go to shows, we're often out to dinner or we're hanging out. So I think it's really important that those types of people are joining the organization. And it's the types of people that we're bringing in that I think are going to make a huge difference. Now, to that point, you have made a lot of changes in the council. You've got this incredible vision. Help us understand a little bit, what is kind of your vision for the councils? You've talked about a new website. I know we've done some new logos. What is kind of the vision? And then do you have maybe a 30-second elevator pitch on where we're going? Help us kind of see that bright dot off in the distance you're taking us to.
We have to be world-class at advocacy,
Yep.
safety, workforce, and marketplace. We as an organization need to provide products and services within each of those 4 buckets so that we can be world-class in everything that we offer. We have 8 different professional councils, is what we call them. And we've talked about a lot of them.
Yep.
The Bus Industry Safety Council, the Bus Maintenance and Repair Council, the Driving Force Council, Women in Buses, the African American Council, the Entertainer Council, the Hispanic Council, the Next Era Leadership Council. All of these have a role to play in giving people a place at ABA where they feel comfortable, where they feel that they have a community that they can call their own. Now, someone like you, you're probably a part of every single council. Leadership,
I make my appearances.
You're in leadership in at least 2 of them, but that's kind of what they're meant to do. Is it's a menu of options to get engaged. And the African American Council may have a certain content focus that the Next Era Leadership Council may be different. But the vision is, how do you take these councils and activate them? I think originally the councils were a forum for people who thought alike or looked alike to get together, which is good. There's a place for that, don't get me wrong. But I also want to go to these councils and basically put the pressure on you to say, what are you going to do to help ABA? We have these 4 core pillars that we have to be kick-ass at. How are you guys going to help get us there? And a good example is, we went to the African American Council and kind of gave them that proposition. And they said, hey, let's go to DC. Let's go lobby.
Cool.
So we said, okay. So we did the African American Council fly-in, and it coincided with the Congressional Black Caucus. They have an annual event in Washington, D.C. It's an amazing gathering of leaders from the Black community. And it brings in icons from pop culture, like Usher, will come
Yeah.
and they'll bring in athletes, but then members of Congress and their staff. And it's all about advancing the ideals and policy priorities of that community. ABA has never had a foot in the door there, but now we do. We brought our council and we integrated with the Congressional Black Caucus. I would argue ABA is stronger today because we have a new cohort in Congress that's influential. There's over 100 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. And we now have an authentic inroad with that group. The next group we're bringing is the Next Era Leadership Council. They're doing a fly-in in Washington, D.C. in March. I think a lot of people think of the bus industry, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but they're going to think of the bus industry as old, stodgy, tired.
Oh, yeah.
And when you bring in the Next Era Council, which it's an incredibly talented group of leaders, many of whom are second and third generation leaders of their family business, they're going to have a way different view of the bus industry because this group is enthusiastic, strategic, business minded. And the net result, ABA is better at lobbying because we have more people helping us.
Right.
And I think ABA's brand on Capitol Hill is stronger because they're seeing the full diversity of our industry. And I think for ABA members, I hope they're getting more value out of their membership because we're creating these opportunities to advance not only industry priorities, but coming to DC is a tremendous brand opportunity for your company. You come to DC and I'll write it for you. You've got a couple of press releases, you've got social media posts, you've got employee newsletters that you can write, annual report fodder. Like there's a ton you can do with it. And let us help you help yourself with your stakeholders and your communications because people care about this stuff. So yeah, that's the goal. I want our councils to be a gathering point, but then I want it to be a forum for action and that we put you to work to bring to life the goals and objectives of our 4 core pillars.
Well, and I want to really tie down on what you're saying about DC because, I have been to DC, I have gone, and I took government class in school, right? I was an AP history kid, absolute nerd.
Nice.
But
Me
what
too.
you think happens there and how you think it works is not necessarily what you see when you get there. And it was really interesting to me because when I was there, I got to go back to back with 2 different associations. At first, we were there with the NLA supporting, and then because we also work across all of passenger ground transportation, literally the day after was TTA. And so we got to go with the NLA and pitch and talk to all of your different representatives, and then the very next day do it with TTA. And one of the things that I found, and it's very funny because you alluded to this earlier. One, I was shocked that our government is ran by what I look at as my kids, right? I have a 20-year-old stepdaughter. By the time this comes out, she'll be 21. God help me.
Oh boy.
But, she's working in the business now. And so I look at my stepdaughter and I looked at the kids that were in these offices and that were in these lunchrooms. And it's funny because when lunchtime came around, we went into the respective basements and we just had lunch with everybody there. And you could tell, you had all of these friends working for all the different representatives on opposite sides. And so the moment for me of, oh, wow, if you really want to get something done, you just got to find the kid who is dating the girl that works in the other office or the other way around, because you see them all hanging out together and they're the ones that are doing a lot of that legwork. You mentioned being a chief of staff. You've got this one person that sits at the top of that, but you don't realize that even though the news coverage is all about that one representative, that there's all these people that are making it happen. And we met some people that were just, for their age, the maturity and things there were incredible. Now, one of the things for me with that is you mentioned as a business. One, I think that we have to represent ourselves. You and I have talked about this at length. One of my biggest pain points in the industry is how we're portrayed. I think of how the media thinks of a motor coach driver. One, they don't think of it as a motor coach. They think of it as a bus. And we all know he's kind of this fat, lazy guy behind the wheel. And that kills me because I know that's not who we are. I see the same thing happen in other industries. I was watching the movie Sing with my kids, and they got to get to the other side of Vegas. And what's the chauffeur is a pig, right? He's a literal overweight pig, and he's got the typical aviator glasses and the hat. And I'm like, yeah, one, they don't do stretch limos anymore, right? Two, it doesn't fit. But they're kind of having the same problem that you have on the motor coach side. And I think it's happened in taxi. I think it's happened in all of Astro Transportation, where the way that drivers are viewed has been skewed and portrayed by Hollywood. And for me, that's a pain point because as someone that spends a lot of time on hiring and developing and training, I think we lose a lot of really great people that would be coming into our industry because they don't know what our industry is. Now, that said, I think one of the great things about the councils is you mentioned the councils are, they're active, they're involved. We're going to DC, we're doing all these things. I know that as a member of Driving Force, we have a literal guide that we've built to give you resources and tools. I was lucky enough, I got to present for BISC this year in Reno, talking about the passenger's perception of us and safety versus how we see ourselves. Help us understand, Fred, because I think if you haven't been involved with ABA, I don't know that there's any other associations that have true councils. And we've kind of talked about these councils. If you're a listener and you've never seen an ABA council, you understand kind of what the structure is and how that works. Can you kind of help us understand? Obviously, we've got these core councils. How does a council work? How is it led? How do you get involved in that? What does it look like if you had to explain to someone what a council at ABA is? How would you kind of enlighten them?
Yeah, I think it's a collection of like-minded people unified around a certain topic. So
Okay.
women in buses. I think it's very easy to understand what is women in buses all about. Well, it's a gathering point for women in our industry who, for many, many years, and you've alluded to this, have felt underrepresented and underappreciated. And this group now, I mean, it's an absolute force of nature. There's over 400 people in Women in Buses. They hold essentially an all-day conference at Marketplace. They meet on a monthly basis for two reasons. They do regular education seminars to advance professional development. And then second, they do lunch and learns where they literally on Zoom, and this all started during COVID, they'll get together and lunch together, talk and catch up and network. And then when there's different shows and events on the road, they get together. So they will have a Women in Buses meetup to bring people together in person. Many of the other councils follow a similar model. Women in Buses, in many ways, is like the preeminent structure for a council. The African American Council, the Hispanic Council, they're convening the same type of like-minded person to learn and to network and to get to know one another. BISC, the Bus Industry Safety Council, and the Maintenance Repair Council, it's a bit more technical. It's really teaching focused. And I think as we roll out a certification program, that will be the primary hub and delivery model for giving the education and giving the training and figuring out how do we test and confirm that you've grasped the content. But in each of these councils, our goal is to have a mix of in-person opportunities. You mentioned BISC has a summer meeting. They also meet at Marketplace, but also virtual, which is not always ideal. But again, for the lives we all live, it's actually a useful tool.
Oh, it's great.
Webinars and networking opportunities that it at least gives you a chance to stay connected. So they're incredible. I think, you touched on Washington, D.C. and some of the different lobbying initiatives you were involved in. I think the council structure speaks to this, but our industry, relatively speaking, is not as big as the defense industry or healthcare.
Well, even trucking.
Or tech, trucking. There's 450,000 trucks sold per year in the U.S. There's about 2,000 buses sold per year in the U.S.
Right.
So relatively speaking, we are not very big. That being said, we are positioning ourselves more effectively than we ever have before. Collectively, we generate $158 billion in economic activity. That translates to 800,000 jobs, $50 billion in wages, and $27 billion in taxes paid. That's giving us a platform now to maybe we don't make as many trucks as they do, but we're still putting a lot of money in people's pockets, and we should be proud of that and be taken serious because of it. But I think also the opportunity, in the same way we want our councils to be coordinated and connected. You're a great example. You're at Driving Force, you're at BISC, your wife is at Women in Buses. We want there to be coordination and cohesion. The same is true for other associations. The United Motor Coach Association is a sister association to ABA, and they do amazing work. They have Bus and Motor Coach News, which is an online news center for the industry.
Right.
They have busrates.com, which is a great lead generator for bus companies. The Bus Expo, it's their annual show that is really, really dialed in on bus equipment, suppliers,
Yes.
tires, seating, the buses themselves. It's a great show. They do great work. When we come to DC, the more we can coordinate our message, the better, because we're all representing, at the end of the day, the same constituencies. In LA, they do amazing work. The insurance study that they put out in 2025, awesome. That is a world-class study. And I'll be honest, and I don't know if this is breaking news, we have hired the same firm that NLA hired to do a study for the motor coach industry, which is awesome. I mean, what do they say? Imitation is the finest form of flattery. Like, we want to draw the same type of data and policy conclusions that NLA produced. When we do that, and we can, maybe you and I need to start Ground Transportation Week in DC. Let's bring us all together.
I will tell you right now, and I this is kind of a soapbox for me, because the vision for us at PAX is I want to support all of passenger ground transportation. My partner came up with a name for the company. I came in after the name was established. He hadn't gone public yet, but I fell in love with the name because there's this beautiful duality in the name PAX Training, because PAX means peace in Latin. Our motto is Anime Pacem, which is peace of mind. But PAX is a passenger, right? You got an airplane. How many packs are on here? They know exactly what you're talking about. You got on a bus. How many packs does this thing hold? I got a 20 pack. Like, it's just terminology for passenger. And it's funny because I've been approached a lot of times to say, hey, when are you going to do trucking? When are you going to move to trucking? And honestly, my answer is always when the passenger ground transportation industry doesn't need me anymore. And that's kind of my way of saying that I think there's so much work to do here. I don't know that I'll ever get to another part of the industry, and I've fallen in love with it. But to the point that you've made, I think one of the things that kills me is if we are going as the motor coach industry, so we've got the motor coach industry going, we've got neuroemergency medical going, you've got taxi going, you've got limo going. We're all feeling a lot of similar pain. For example, insurance is the common thread between all of passenger ground transportation right now that in many cases is quite literally strangling companies. There are companies that are at a point where either due to a series of accidents or sometimes even by no fault of their own have seen their rates increase, are in a position now where they may not be able to continue operating because of that. And we've seen the cost of each claim is rising. Now, we've had a lot of insurance experts on here. I don't want to go deep into it. But what I see is this opportunity, because if each industry comes in and they go in and they give the exact same message, I think to something my wife loves to say. She says it takes 7 touches in marketing, right? She's a marketing major. It's 7 touches on a message. And I can tell you, at PAX, we see it all the time. They come to our booth, they engage in our website, they might be a podcast listener, but we have these different touches. And I think what we forget is that when we are going to DC, when we are doing these types of things, we are selling that. And one of the things that I want to compliment you and ABA on is that I have seen the councils go outside of ABA. So for example, with BISC, we coordinate with California Bus Association and we do BISC West. There's BISC East, right? We were in Minnesota. There's all of these local associations where you're seeing coordination. And I think one of the big important things that tries, and I see every association try to drive us home, is you've got to have similar coordination when it comes to your representatives in government. You mentioned Bushnell and Overland Park. That just happens to be my backyard. We all have these 6 degrees of separation. If I go see Jerry Moran, because I'm in Kansas, I go see Moran, his office is down the street. If I just go see him once and I talk to one of the interns of the office and I never follow up, I never figure out what events are there, I never look at what I can do locally, I'm missing an opportunity. Because to the point you made when we were talking about the Black Caucus, we're not a big industry, but we represent a absolutely crucial facet. If every bus went off the road tomorrow, the world would grind to a halt.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The other thing that I think we have the opportunity, our industry has done these kind of targeted fly-ins over the years where we bring in one group. And I just think, having been a congressional staffer, the reason healthcare defense, tech, oil, gas. The reason they are who they are, it's repetition. They
Right.
show up. And so I think what we're trying to do at ABA is we want to support, the UMA that I mentioned. They do an incredible fly-in each year for the motor coach industry. Like, we want to support that. We want to be there for that. Other tourism organizations, we want to support their fly-ins. And we as ABA, we want to now put our own on the table. And these micro fly-ins that we're doing with the African American Council, with the Next Era, when Women in Buses comes to town, when BISC comes to town, I think what we're doing is we're filling the cup and we're hitting more offices more repeatedly. And when you put all that together, we're all having a much bigger impact. And it's not about competing with one another. It's about coordinating, blanketing the field. It's press coverage.
Yep.
And when we do all those things, again, we are such a stronger industry. So I just cannot overemphasize how important collaboration, coordination. I think you probably see this in the marketplace, but vertical integration is happening all day long. If you go to any motor coach company website, not any, but most, you're going to see on their website, what do you need? You need a black car, you need a Sprinter van, you need a minibus, you need an executive coach. And I think ABA, and I don't know if this is breaking news, but more than half of our membership, they register minibuses as part of their FMCSA fleets. We as ABA, we've never talked about minibuses, but half of our members are operating them. So we're going to include that now in our membership value proposition, because what you're doing at Driving Force and what you're doing at BISC, it speaks to the same constituencies of whether you're a motor coach company or if you operate minibuses. In most cases, you're doing both, because operators want to be able to facilitate any itinerary
Yes.
at any time. And so we as an association, we got to keep up with that trend. So I think another opportunity is, how do we take that vertical integration that's happening in the marketplace and use our existing pillars, advocacy, safety, operations, and sales, to support all levels of ground transportation? I think that's the opportunity. And if we do that well and we bring all of us together, again, our voice is stronger. We're creating more opportunities for selling, for safety, for better workforce and culture development. And I love that you keep talking about the consumer, the passenger. At the end of the day, we can't lose sight. That's who pays the bills. And if we're a better industry for the consumer, we're all going to do a whole lot better long term.
I think there's something that really has kind of come to light for me. There's a couple big things. The first is, we are in the era of mixed fleet. We're in an era where it's no longer I'm in this silo, I'm in that silo. It's I'm operating in multiple silos. Where you came in from is what I think separates a lot of the mindset. But at the end of the day, we're seeing the rise of mixed fleet. And we were seeing that before COVID. I think we've just resumed it. I think the other thing, and the reason I keep coming back to the passenger, I've been in San Francisco, I've been in Phoenix, I've been in all these places where you see, Vegas, you got Waymo, you got Zoox. We've covered autonomous at Lightem. And I think one of the things that for me, we were talking with someone about it. They said, well, we got to get them to slow down. We got to worry about safety. We got to do this. We got to go do that. And what immediately occurred to me is they were talking about fighting the rising tide. We're going to fight progress. And the problem is progress wins, right? If you were a manufacturer of rotary dial phones and you said, these whole cell phone things, carrying it in your pocket, it's a horrible idea. We're going to rally and fight against that. We all know what happened to you, right? The manufacturers of rotary phones evolved or died. That was kind of the thing. And I don't know that that's the point that we're at, but I will tell you what you see in really great businesses is they lean into their strengths. And the reason I keep coming back to the passenger is one of the big things for me is, even in a fully autonomous future, right? You go full Blade Runner with this thing as far as you can go. Cars drive themselves, buses drive themselves, everything drives itself. You're going to see the same thing that we're watching happen in our kids with social media. There will be a starvation for human connection. And I can tell you the big thing, and I've spoken about this to chauffeurs, I've spoken about this to motor coach operators and drivers. My big thing is, if we lean into what do we do for the passenger in terms of service and experience, and what can we provide, and how can we be the best possible thing, that's what sets these operations apart. That's what is the difference, right? I will share with you, I was on Southwest flight recently, And I was talking to one of the flight attendants about all the changes and whether or not the airline was losing its soul. And I kind of shared, I said, I've been flying with this airline for 10 years. And the one thing that scares me the most is what's going to happen with you guys, the way you operate, the people. And I kid you not, getting off that flight, it was a very short conversation. That flight attendant hugged me, right? An autonomous car hugs me, I die. Yeah, you don't want a hug from an autonomous car or an autonomous plane. But my point here being that I think in all of the logistics, you can kind of lose sight. Now, that said, tying this back into where we were, when we go to Washington, when we go to these places, it's the same thing. Being in that office is not the same as sending a letter. Now, if you operate motor coaches or school buses or, a limo fleet or a taxi fleet, you're going to have different unique items in each of those segments that matter. But if the core message there is aligned across all of those, and all of these people coming in are saying, hey, we have an insurance crisis. This is a unified plan from the passenger ground transportation industry. We want you to look at it. What happens a month later? Hey, I'm from the NLA. I want you to look at this unified plan. Hey, I'm from the TTA. Hey, we're here with IMG. Hey, we're here with whoever. All of these different groups, networks, and associations, if we're all able to come in, even if we have our own unique ones, like you were saying, that repetition is going to get us there. So let me ask you then, what in your mind does that look like? How do we, and obviously I've volunteered, I'm going to tell you like I have on the podcast with everyone else, I volunteer as Tribune to help grease those wheels between the associations. I'm lucky enough, I get to work between all of them. So please lean on me for that because I'd be happy to coordinate. But how do we make that happen so we can start pushing this forward? And how does that kind of start? What does it look like when we're finally able to turn that tide? How do we know it's working?
Yeah, I go back to my very first marketplace. It was in Philadelphia in 2025.
Oh, that was
And the day of my opening speech, which is basically my coming out party to the entire industry, was the day that Donald Trump levied tariffs on Canada imports.
I remember.
And this was like a week into his presidency. And, obviously the floor was buzzing. And so the very first thing that I did is we pulled together the head of the Canadian Motorcoach Association and the United Motorcoach Association. And the three of us said, hey, look, this is a problem. I don't exactly know how we're going to fix it, but at a minimum, we got to show a united front. So those two guys came up on stage with me. So at my very first opportunity to meet the whole ABA community, I shared the stage with these two association leaders. And it was the message that needed to be sent. And fast forward to today, trucks have a 25% tariff, buses have 10%.
Right.
It's not good. I'd much rather have zero.
Well, explain why that matters, right? For anybody that's not a bus operator and they're here like Canada, that's not my problem. Explain why that matters. Because if you don't understand the motor coach supply line, you might not understand why that's such a big deal.
So 65% of all motor coaches on the road are made in Canada.
Right.
The rest are made in Europe. Europe sells about 9 times as many motor coaches as the US does. So the critical mass is much bigger in Europe for busing. So that's why there's a lot of the supply chain is based there. One of the Canadian companies, they're 101 years old.
Bravo.
So in some ways, the market has dictated where they're based. They're a Canadian company. They've won in the marketplace, and that's just where they're based, where they're located. US manufacturers, they've been out of the motor coach business since the 80s. It just wasn't attractive to them. I gave you the statistics. It's 2,000 sales per year.
Yeah, GM used to make them, and GM got out of the business.
They got out of the business, and that was market forces that did that. So just the volume really doesn't exist. So our messaging to the government is, look, hey, there should be no tariff. We have no other option. There's not a big enough supply chain, yet we are essential. We move the military, we move natural disaster aid, but most industries have gotten dinged with tariffs. We are not immune from it, but we're 15 percentage points better than the other regulated commercial vehicle, which is trucks.
Right.
So again, you can't call it a win because 10% is not good, but it's a lot less bad. And that's because of the lobbying that we did.
Well, I am a big believer in little wins, right? One of my favorite things, and I talk about my father-in-law and his business on here all the time, because my father-in-law gets driven nuts because he successfully has a business. And everybody goes, oh, Ralph, you're an overnight success. And his favorite thing is, and he's very animated, what are you talking about? What do you mean overnight success? I've been doing this for 30 years.
Yeah,
I was grinding
awesome.
in my basement, like literally working in my basement, right? Like, I got divorced in the middle. I mean, but he's right. And I think that, to me, I see that as a little win because it's not 25. We
Yep.
were able to do that. And I think what happens, and I tell this to operators, I tell this to anyone that'll listen, the way that you get the big win is each little win. You have to compound and you have to build. And so I think that's something that, could it be better? Oh God, yes. But it's a lot better than what it could have been if we were at that 25.
In the same proclamation that we got hit with 10% tariffs, President Trump, the president of the
Yeah.
United States, declared that buses are an essential part of our transportation infrastructure. And he enumerated why. We move military.
Right.
We are there when natural disasters hit. We are providing essential services across the economy. And I think the power of that comes when the next COVID hits or the next crisis hits. When COVID happened, the bus industry had no message, they were not coordinated,
Right.
and we were a complete and total afterthought. If COVID happens tomorrow, the first thing I'm doing, I'm taking that presidential proclamation and I'm saying, look, we're essential.
Yeah.
You've already identified that.
Established.
So let's work together now to protect this essential industry. So again, we got a lot of work to do because 10% is not good, especially with rising insurance costs and all that. But you have to be able to pause and say, that's a $130 million difference. The difference between 10% and 25%, 130 million bucks. And that is not flowing through to our operators. And again, zero is better, but that's less bad.
Well, I think that goes back to us saying a second ago, right? You pat yourself on the back and you go right back at it. And I think
Exactly.
that moment of not, yeah, we're not having a giant party, but that pat on the back, okay, let's go see how we can do better, I think is one of the driving things that is going to make things work in terms of getting this all done.
You talked about how do we keep the momentum, the coordination up. And I've been here 18 months. I feel like my legs are getting under me. Now, I keep doing stuff that makes me feel like I'm changing things around. But with my legs under me, I think we have the opportunity now to do more with UMA, to do more with NLA, to do more with the National Tour Association, to do more with US Travel. So as ABA has gotten our house in order, now I think is the time to expand partnerships, to work more closely together. So to the extent you can help open doors and create warm introductions, let's bring it to life together. I have no doubt we all will be better off when we bring that kind of coordinated future to life.
No, absolutely. And I got to say, for me, anything I can do there, I'm a very firm believer in a rising tide is going to raise all boats. I was on the show floor at UMA and I ran into Glenn, who is the president of BANI. And I happened to sit on the CTA&J, right, which is the Chauffeur Transportation Association of New Jersey. And Mike Rose, who is a friend and a customer of ours, he does an absolutely incredible job there. Glenn does an absolutely incredible job with BANI. And I immediately said, I need to make sure there's a connection here. I need to make sure these two are coordinating because what happens in New York affects New Jersey. They're very interconnected out there on the East Coast. And so I immediately said, hey, Glenn, let me get your information. Mike's not here. I want to introduce you. And I can tell you those types of connections, those types of working together and coordinating are what's going to make a huge difference. Because just like we're talking about at the national level, having people coordinating in DC, guess what? You've got to coordinate locally within your own state, within your own region. So I am happy to do anything I can to be a conduit and to help make that happen.
So for about a year, Glenn, Every, and I have been on a Thursday afternoon call talking about idling in New York City.
Oh, geez.
Which is we could spend another hour.
Yeah, that'll be a whole nother episode.
But we just sent a letter to the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, laying out the problems and some proposed solutions that we think DOT should get involved in. I'm going to be with the Secretary in about 11 days as part of his Great American Road Trip. This is a huge problem, and we don't have enough time, but Glenn has been an amazing partner as the head of the UMA Legislative Committee, as the head of BANI, and just as a sharp operator. So I'm all for it, and it's a great story and reminder that, again, the rising tide, as you said, lifts all boats.
Agreed. So as we close this out, I think we could keep going for another 2 or 3 hours. Definitely we'll have to have you back on, especially because
Please.
I honestly believe that if we cannot get the entire industry to start coordinating, we are going to start seeing the fragmentation hurting us. We've got to start working together. And I just love having someone like-minded that I can have on to do that. What, if there was one message that you had to leave us with, or one piece that you wanted our listeners to be able to take away as we close this out, what would that be?
I think there's a home for you at ABA, whether it's operator, travel, sales, maintenance, safety, or CEO leaders. There's a place for you here. And I think that comes through in our educational content, in our councils, our in-person events, the BISC summer meeting, our fly-ins, marketplace. I just really thank people for joining. As a small business owner myself, it's not easy to give your dollars to associations and say, hey, I want a good investment. I want a good return. But I think we're building something that can show you that it's worth it and that you can get a return from that investment. Because again, there's strength in numbers. And so we need you.
I will follow that up by saying, if you do join, come and find me. As Fred has already alluded to, I'm very happily involved in my councils. I will very happily introduce you to the ABA side of things, get you oriented. And I will share, I just want to put this last thing, shout out to Stephanie with her Broadway shows, because I don't know of any other show where I get a Broadway show at lunch. Fred, we might have to put you on the spot. I think what we might have to do is put a clip in here, because at this last ABA marketplace, you got on stage. We actually got you involved in the Broadway shows. And I got to say, man, you're built for show business. You absolutely killed it. So we will drop that in at the end.
It was an opportunity of a lifetime to be part of the Broadway musical experience. I had a lot of fun. And I got to meet Glenda from Wicked. That was incredible. My daughter thinks that was the coolest thing ever.
I will say it is probably my favorite part of ABA. And that's kind of my guilty pleasure there, right? There's no educational value for me other than I just get to see what talent looks like. The people they bring out, just the absolute pure stagecraft. I got to tell you, Masquerade this year, where we had the Phantom of the Opera just coming in out of nowhere, making his way up to the stage, was incredible. So for anybody that hasn't been to ABA Marketplace, you should go to ABA Marketplace. You should join ABA. Fred, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast and all the work that you're doing. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Drop your comments below. We're going to have all of the contact information for ABA so you guys can learn more. And Fred, thanks again for coming on, buddy.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it.
Infinity ruins. It's where they come to, picnic. Not that I've ever been here before. Tee-hee. I know my reputation is that I'm an awful flirt. 'Cause I smile and I bat my eyes and like to switch my skirt. But unless you eat dinner, you ain't getting no dessert. 'Cause I'm not that kind of gal.
Thank you for listening to the Ground Transportation Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about PAX Training and to contact James, go to paxtraining.com. And for more information about driving transactions and to contact Ken, go to drivingtransactions.com. We'll see you next time on the Ground Transportation Podcast.